and the warmest welcome to this week's edition of Innovate Africa. I'm Natasha Jacobs. Now, Africa's construction industry faces distinct challenges with rapid population growth, low levels of funding, a lack of skills and inadequate infrastructure against the backdrop of a severe energy shortages. In South Africa, new legislation has been passed to encourage green building practices, and although it may in some cases add to the cost, it gives the construction industry the opportunity to develop new and innovative building techniques to capture this growing building market.
The South African government has amended the National Building Regulations Act of 1977 to introduce legislation that calls for more energy-efficient technologies and building methods to reduce electricity consumption as the country faces a critical energy shortage.
Any new building plans passed by any council has to adhere to a series of standards and specifications which come from that standard, and it mandates and specifies energy consumption within the building shell, which then has quite an important impact on the materials, the choice of materials and the actual design of the building.
Brick and mortar construction, as we know it, does not typically adhere to the minimum requirements of the new legislation. And this is pushing construction companies towards developing innovative green building techniques with new materials and new designs.
And by going green, you need to look at technology, you need to look at new methodology of construction. And we call it high performance alternative building solutions, which includes light frame steel construction. And in essence, it's like building a cooler box effect, whereby, a cooler box is also a hot box. If you put something warm in there, it keeps hot. If you put something cold in there, it keeps it cool. So the cost of running and managing and maintaining a building that is built out of light frame steel is much less than a conventional building.
The Silver Line Group specializes in building light steel frame structures and were commissioned to build the world's first ever energy-efficient McDonald's in South Africa.
We've recently started to build the McDonald's stores in South Africa, and McDonald's actually commented that they made a 15% saving on the expenses, on the cost of the building. They made a significant saving on the time of construction. It used to take them about 7 months to build a McDonald's. We now do it in about 3 months. So it's a huge saving from that point of view. So from that point of view, also the fact that the building is like a cooler box, it means that there are lots of savings for the lifespan in the building in terms of electricity usage, air conditioning usage, and so on. So it's well worth from a commercial venture point of view.
One innovative building technique gathering speed in developed markets is embedded generation. Buildings are fitted with technologies to produce their own renewable energy. Green Cape believes that this could be a growth area for the African market.
Embedded generation is certainly an area where South Africa is lagging behind. There are a number of good and bad reasons for that. Some of it is a legislative framework where there is no real precedent or no real frameworks which enable municipalities to understand how to allow a higher level of embedded generation and how to allow feed into the grid. There are a number of complications with feed into the grid. It has to do with ensuring that good quality, highly specified inverters, solar collectors, regulators, and good quality equipment is used, and not all municipalities, especially smaller munics, may not necessarily have the technical knowledge to know how to evaluate this, which then creates a stumbling block.
Embedded generation has an additional benefit aside from easing the burden on the power grid. Landlords can use this technique to generate revenue.
a common trend in specifically the US, and it's something that I do think will take post in South Africa in the near future, is what you call the energy leasing or energy field leasing space, where an energy service company would approach a business and rent their roof space in order to build a photovoltaic generation plant. And there's many different ways that the legal structure of an organization or an agreement like that may work.
While green technologies such as light steel frame construction and embedded generation may add to the building's cost, the benefits are lower energy consumption and reduced maintenance costs over the long run. Thomas Marie, Cape Town, South Africa.
Now joining me in studio today to take a closer look at innovation in Africa's building and construction industry is Hennie, CEO of Moladi, Claudio Rossi, Operations Manager at Ikaya Future House Systems, and joining us from our studios in Cape Town is Jonathan Peppler, Director at the Silverline Group. Gentlemen, welcome.
Okay.
Now, of course, the insert has set the scene for today's discussion, and it's clear that it's not just a case of laying brick and mortar anymore. There are a lot of considerations, and Hennie, one of the most prominent is the green agenda. Now, from a Moladi perspective, how important are environmental considerations in the construction industry these days, given that it's not a case of nice to, but have to?
Natasha, I think a lot of emphasis is put on the structure itself. We should really be looking at how this product is manufactured and the energy consumed to manufacture the product and ship the product. So if you look at a panel system, for instance, a lot of shipping diesel is used to transfer it, let's say, to Nigeria from South Africa. So we've got to keep a balance between the energy cost and the energy consumption whilst it's living or its life of the product. With Moladi, what we do, we injection mold a panel, which we ship, which is a once-off cost. That cost is amortized over 50 uses. So our manufacturing cost of the product is absolutely green or zero rated carbon footprint. The life of the product then depends on what type of roof, what type of ceiling, how do you orientate your windows and all that that makes either the house warm or cool depending on what you want to achieve.
And Claudia, this is where you could perhaps step in, because Ikaya specializes in integrated energy-saving and eco-friendly building systems. That's quite a mouthful.
That's quite a mouthful.
Now, is it safe to say that the company is geared towards the green market, given that it's such a prominence today?
Absolutely. I mean, basically our building system, so the Future House building system is based around, it's a pre-manufactured panel with a high-density insulating material, which is then going to give a lot of a green value to your building, because it's creating that hot box and cool box effect that we were listening to in the introduction. And it's that's then encapsulated in a wire mesh as well. So the building panel itself is extremely light and extremely portable. So also in terms of carbon footprint and getting it from factory to site is a very efficient process, and that's then finished off with a structural plaster, and so it's a finished structure that has a conventional look and feel while giving you a lot of energy advantages as well.
Now, Jonathan, you've heard from your colleagues in Johannesburg and what their company do. Of course, we heard from the inset that Silverline specializes in constructing light frame steel structures. Now, although it's not unique to South Africa, it is used internationally. You decided to bring the technologies to South Africa. What was the motivation behind this?
Well, I think in all, it is all about the country's resources that's available, the whole energy efficiency drive that we have in South Africa, and at the end of the day, there's definitely a cost motive, because the cost of construction is just going up. If one look at Africa particularly, I've just read in the Forbes magazine that cement in Nigeria is the highest priced in the world. So, the cost of material in Africa is a big issue.
Now, Hennie, on the show we love debunking myths and industry stereotypes. Is green building more expensive than traditional building?
I don't think so. I think if we had to stick with conventional, I really believe that, in a sense, conventional wouldn't make the mark, because it's antiquated. The brick is 3,500 years old. So when I came up from Port Elizabeth, I didn't walk up here, I flew up here. That is technology. And I think in construction we need to look at technology and use technology to our advantage. So firstly, we need to look at mass housing, because again, whether we have green buildings, let's say for a particular market, the emissions come from mass housing. It doesn't come from business in a small application. So we have to incorporate this thinking for the future of Africa, because Africa is waking up, 1.2 billion people. So we really believe that what we've got to combine the construction with is job creation. So with Moladi, one of the key aspects is that we take our technology to a particular country and we train the people in their country to use their sand and their cement and their steel reinforcing, and then we construct the house in a day. So we basically cast a whole brick or block in one go with a mold. And that is what we do different. And we believe that that makes a huge impact in the way that we don't have no waste, we have very little transport cost, and we have a high production rate, which means that if you look at the time spent to build a house conventionally, then it in a sense makes a house unaffordable. So the issue that we have is affordability of mass housing. And then the biggest issue is social acceptance.
Before we get to that, and that is about an hour's discussion, Claudio, you mentioned that, building things on a larger scale, and we've heard business, build these expensive green buildings, specialized lighting, solar powered, this and that. If we build that economy of scale, if we make mass housing greener and better and more efficient, would it make it more cost effective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key sort of ways of sort of saving or bringing costs even more into line by using alternative green technologies as opposed to a conventional approach would be to implement other energy efficient lighting, etc. Solar geysers on mass within larger housing projects. So absolutely, there is an economy of scale. I mean, we've certainly found that if one was to implement. We've seen doing cost comparisons between sort of show houses. So we're doing a house in Cape Town at the Parliamentary Housing Project at the moment, and we're doing a house in Clarinet Ridge as part of an ABSA development, and we're sort of trying to work out costs there for going further and for doing more houses. Using the technology, and absolutely there's also a training advantage there as well, because we also believe in sort of training people in using the Future House system locally, and so without sort of trying to recreate industries in a particular area, we try to integrate with commercial and traditional building industries and just sort of make training part and parcel of the package.
Now, Jonathan, a lot of aspects to this green agenda, but the fact is it's being driven by legislation and regulation. How important is it for the industry to keep abreast of these changing regulatory systems, and in the same token keep ahead instead of reacting reactively to the changing legislation?
Well, I think it's probably more important to be proactive. The main reason is that, if you look at the conventional building methodology within South Africa and the new legislation that's been passed with regards to the efficiency situation, conventional building now has to add things to their construction methodology in order to comply to the new legislation. Whereas the alternative building methodology, like ours and my colleagues on the panel, we've already been complying to the minimum requirements for a very long time. So obviously it has a huge cost on construction. If you need to add something to your construction methodology in order to comply to the new legislation. So it's probably always advantageous to be ahead of the pack and to be proactive.
Well, on that note, we're going to a short ad break. More on Innovate Africa straight after this. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa.
Neotel is South Africa's first converged telecommunications network operator. We provide cost-effective, reliable solutions tailored to your business needs, which includes voice, internet, and data solutions. Neotel, inspiring possibilities.
We are a huge population. For us to feed our population, we launched a very serious effort to create a structural shift in the wheat utilization patterns in this country. Because our current import of wheat is not one that we can sustain. You can use cassava for high-quality cassava flour to replace some of the wheat flour that we're currently importing.
The incorporation of cassava flour into the wheat flour did bring up some technical challenges. In Nigeria, First Blends Limited has collaborated with DuPont Nutrition and Health to improve the consistency of the baked products. Through DuPont's science and innovation, we now have the right choice of functional ingredients that delivers the best quality in the baked products that Nigerians love to eat.
And what I actually feel so excited about is that we are using what we are the largest producer of in the world in our food chain. I think we'll be well able to feed ourselves, not by food from others, from food we grow by ourselves.
Welcome back to Innovate Africa, where we're taking a closer look at innovation in Africa's building and construction industry. Still with me in studio is Hennie, CEO at Moladi, Claudia Rossi, Operations Manager at Ikaya Future House Systems, and from our studios in Cape Town is Jonathan Pepler, Director at the Silverline Group. Gents, let's get straight back into it. Cost. You can't get away from it, Hennie. It's everywhere. And South Africa has a particularly interesting disparity. We look at the RDP housing, which is called low-cost housing. That's for people who earn less than 3,500 Rand per month, and that's 60% of our population. We've got the affordable housing segment, 3,500 to 25,000 Rand. That's a 600,000 Rand house, and 32% of the home loan market sit here.
Yep.
We need houses, and we need a lot of it. We're sitting with a population of 54 million.
Yep.
What do we do to get there, if cost-effectively, safely, and sustainably?
I think we have to start right at base level, and that is to encourage artisans at school. So we really have to look at, do we train people to address this market? Because currently we have 800,000 students with degrees unemployed.
But I have to ask this, Hennie, because you know, a lot of time labor in the construction market is seen as low cost and low skilled.
Yes.
Is this the reality?
Well, I think currently, if you ask government that question, then they would say it's very true, because they have to spend 58 billion Rand to fix homes that they have built. Mm-hmm. We just don't have the tax volume of money to spend 58 billion.
So build it properly the first time.
Absolutely. And the yardstick that is used to measure whether you are cheap or whether you are expensive is really a fallacy. Mm-hmm. Because you can have an emerging contractor that hasn't a cooking clue as to how to build a house, but they will measure you against him. Mm-hmm. But they will neglect to use you to measure against Marion Roberts, for instance. So the yardstick is totally not natural. Mm-hmm. When you look at what government currently is spending on an RDP home, and Moladi has always said we don't build RDP homes, we build subsidy homes. Mm-hmm. Because it's tainted so much that no one wants to really play in that market
It's
anymore.
Almost a swear word.
Absolutely is. So if you look at the unhappy people, you know, I think a castle for a wealthy man or a castle for a poor man is still a castle. Mm-hmm. And if you've got this high expectations of moving into a house and then within the first month it starts cracking or your roof blows off, it's devastating for those people. And I think that we need to do it correct the first time. And with Moladi, what we do is we have engineers on site when we do a foundation. So we have that signed off and we have a professional indemnity. We then erect the formwork, we put the window frames, the door frames, the plumbing, the reinforcing, everything in position. We mix in local river sand and cement, and we cast that in with buckets or with a pump with local labor. Tomorrow we take the formwork off and we have the shell of the house standing, and we have cubes that we send for test results. So we guarantee our structures. We know that after 27 years of how long moladi's been in the market, we're busy with projects in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in Mozambique, in Namibia, and Botswana. So we cannot afford to taint our name. So when we do a job, we do it perfectly first time.
Claudia, it's not easy to do. Now, we just said that low cost doesn't necessarily have to mean low quality. How can we innovatively make sure that the two come together, that you utilize what you have, but to make the best to make a house a home?
Well, absolutely. That's sort of the million-dollar question, really, I mean, part of it comes down to having a construction system, or whichever system that might be, but that is regulated as well, and that there.
Is it regulated enough?
I think certainly in terms of, I mean, our experience has certainly been that as you're constantly trying to prove yourself, and as Hennie was just saying, your name is extremely valuable and important, and so there's a large amount of regulation which we like in terms of as Future House sort of building correctly, but according to there are a number of local bodies, so Agro in South Africa as well has a number of checks and balances in place, but in many ways it would be nice to see that implemented throughout the industry. But one way, that one could try to deliver, I mean, we usually operate more in the affordable housing market.
Which is the next segment of the market?
Because our product doesn't really compromise. I mean, so it's not like we have a lower grade product.
But it's still servicing 32% of the mortgage market.
Absolutely, and so we're very happy to in whichever way try and contribute towards servicing that need. But I certainly think that there would be ways in which one could try to, through economies of scale, through training projects, to sort of bring associated costs with building down, and potentially also address the subsidy end of the market.
Now, Jonathan, low-cost housing is also traditionally associated with this tiny little house, about 40 square meters. Where will we ever get to the point where this increases? I mean, I just got back from a weekend in the winelands in Robertson, and driving through the area, driving through Alexandria, just outside of Sandton. These are tiny houses which home 4, 5, 6, and even 8 people.
No, it is totally unacceptable. It's the living conditions is very bad in some of these environments, and at the end of the day, everybody would want to live in a nice environment. There's a lot of problems associated with low-cost housing, and one of them is surely the fact that we struggle to get good artisans in South Africa. I mean, it's a lot of people say they're artisans, but they're not really artisans, and that's the beginning of the end. People that's not qualified, don't know how to do the work, render themselves out to do the work. They get contracts and all sorts of things, and they taint the industry. It's very difficult to compete under these circumstances. But at the end of the day, it's so important that everybody, lives in very nice conditions, and that costs a lot of money. And at the end of the day, there's just not enough funds available to procure these houses.
Hennie, you're burning to jump in there.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm so pleased I caught your eye. I think that if I look at RDP homes currently being built with blocks, if I took that Sandton home and put it in Alex, or I took the Alex home and put it in Sandton, then both would be rejected. Firstly, in the Sandton home in Alex, unaffordable. The home in Alex in Sandton would be a low standard. So we are building homes for poor people with a different standard of construction. And this is where Moladi builds one wall and then finishes it differently for a lower end of the market, and finishes it different for a higher end of the market, or a middle
But without
market.
Compromising quality?
Absolutely not. So this is where the difference comes in. If you look at RDP market, then it's, in a sense, it is substandard. Because how do you measure the strength of a block? You don't, because many of the blocks are bought on the side of the road where they're manufactured, and those collapse, and when they collapse, the whole building collapses. So it makes the NHBRC's role very difficult to manage this quality when they don't know where the blocks come from. We produce that block in our mold, and we have a birth certificate when it gets crushed. So this is the difference that we apply.
So, Claudia, it comes down to increasing quality, but you also need people to monitor the quality. Skills and training forms part and parcel of what you do. What are you doing at the moment to make sure that, you know, the workers you employ and the people you employ at your company are up to standard and have the skills needed to build in the industry?
Well, yeah, we have, in the first instance, we have a training centre where we're based in Centurion. So we have a training centre on site. So for people who sort of can't come to the training centre, that we provide training there. Alternatively, we'll go out to sites and provide training on the job as well, as it were. So there's definitely that sort of training component.
Jonathan, it's not just about training, you know, the labour force, it's training business. Interestingly enough, you have a franchising model with Silverline. Can you tell us a bit about that? How do you give support to young aspiring businessmen or women who want to come into the construction industry?
Well, you know, we're one of the very few franchise construction companies in the world, and certainly probably the only one in South Africa. But franchising is not an easy concept, you know. When you deal with franchises, you have to have a standard. We've got a training academy. We're based in Cape Town, and we ensure that the standard and the quality and the erecting of our buildings is all the same. You know, when you go into a fast food restaurant, a specific brand, anywhere in the world, you find the burger is the same, you know. It tastes the same, it looks the same. So the same with us as a construction company. Training is very, very important to us. We have to ensure that everybody is up to speed all the time. We have national seminars, national training forums, you know, and we do also on-site training apart from theoretical training and practical training. So none of our franchisees can go on any site unless they comply 100% to the specifications and they know exactly how to construct the job. What we also do is, when one of our franchisees goes on site for the first time, we would send a on-site trainer to the person, and that person, the on-site trainer, will assist the franchisee on-site for the first number of projects until we are satisfied that that franchisee is 100% skilled and know exactly what to do.
Well, gentlemen, we joked off air that we need about 4 days for this conversation. We have sadly run out of time, but we will definitely revisit the topic. Well, we've come to the end of this week's show. Thank you to my guests, Hennie, CEO of Moladi, Claudia Rossi, Operations Manager at Ikaya Future House Systems, and Jonathan Pepler, Director at the Silverline Group. Remember to join us again in 2 weeks' time for another look at the people, the projects and the policies that are innovating Africa. Until then, it's goodbye and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.